When leaders announce nuclear threats, the headline rarely tells you where the real danger lies. The question is, why closing a narrow waterway is considered an equal or greater strategic weapon than building a bomb that destroys cities. Today we read this move as strategy, not as a morality play. We must understand how Iran has found a way to bypass American military superiority and force global powers into submission without ever firing a single shot in open combat. The viral narrative focuses on the fear of an atomic device, framing the world's anxiety around months or years required for enrichment. However, strategic analysis suggests this is a distraction from their actual nuclear option, closing the Strait of Hormuz. Unlike a weapon that requires complex infrastructure and risks total annihilation upon retaliation, shutting down this waterway is an asymmetric lever Iran can deploy instantly. It allows Tehran to bypass U.S. conventional naval dominance by inflicting immediate global economic pain rather than engaging in a direct military clash where they would be outgunned. To understand the mechanism of this power, we must look at how Iran neutralizes American strength. The strategy relies on abandoning the notion that nuclear weapons are necessary for leverage. Instead, Tehran utilizes an asymmetric toolkit involving drones, naval mines, and swarming small boats to enforce a de facto blockade. This approach allows them to bypass U.S. naval superiority without triggering a full-scale conventional war where they would be outmatched in open-sea combat. The threat is not just theoretical, it involves saturating the Gulf with fast patrol boats for suicide attacks and deploying smart mines that can target critical infrastructure like oil terminals and desalination plants almost instantly. We have seen close encounters where Iranian vessels approached U.S. destroyers within 900 yards, demonstrating a level of aggression that stops short of war but creates constant tension. This is not about winning a battle, it is about creating a scenario where the United States cannot easily respond without suffering political consequences at home. The conflict has shifted from a clash of military capabilities to a contest of political endurance and bargaining leverage. Quick resource note: I keep a curated set of Amazon search links in the description for books, gear, and tools relevant to this channel's topics. Some are affiliate links, so I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. Please consider supporting the channel by using those links if you find something useful. The stakes here are defined by cold economic math rather than ideological fervor. 17 million barrels of oil per day flow through the Strait of Hormuz, representing a major source of global energy exports that can be weaponized instantly. This volume is so critical that over one-third of U.S. manufactured imports rely on this route to reach key partners in Asia, whose supply chains depend entirely on these shipping lanes. Closing the strait does not just hurt Iran, it inflicts immediate, catastrophic pain on the global economy and American consumers who prioritize low fuel prices above all else. This creates a profound political dilemma for Washington. A hypothetical conflict scenario indicates that while Iran is fighting an existential struggle for regime survival, the U.S. public prioritizes cheap gas and quick exits over long-term military engagement. Even limited casualties among ground troops during mine-clearing operations could be framed as a domestic disaster, making military action look like a political failure rather than a strategic victory. The fear of mounting costs and rising fuel prices forces leaders to consider concessions that might otherwise seem impossible in the face of aggression. This dynamic explains why global markets react violently to threats about shipping lanes even when no nuclear tests occur. It clarifies that U.S. military superiority in open sea battles does not equate to strategic dominance because the cost of clearing mines or engaging swarming boats is politically unsustainable for American voters. The nuclear bomb threat is a long-term project with uncertain outcomes, whereas closing the strait is an immediate, high-leverage economic weapon that forces global powers to negotiate on Iran's terms simply by threatening their energy supply chains. Furthermore, we must understand who actually pulls this trigger. The decision to close the strait is not driven by elected officials or presidents, but by the Supreme Leader and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. These hardline actors prioritize nationalist policies and regime survival over diplomatic engagement. They use external threats to suppress domestic opposition, making negotiations with Iranian moderates often ineffective as they lack authority within their own system. Consequently, real power resides in a security apparatus willing to weaponize global trade routes to ensure its own existence. When we look at the timeline of potential conflicts or negotiations, the asymmetry becomes even clearer. While Pakistani mediators spent more time on internal Iranian negotiations than with US-Iran talks in early rounds, and while Iran suggests single-digit years for deal durations compared to US pushes for 20-year enrichment freezes, these diplomatic details are secondary to the underlying threat vector. The real leverage comes from the ability to disrupt trade instantly without needing a nuclear arsenal that takes months or years to develop. The strategic value lies not just in disruption, but in forcing a political crisis within Washington itself. By threatening the global economy, Iran forces the United States into a position where military action looks like a domestic disaster rather than a strategic victory. This is why the Strait of Hormuz is more valuable than a nuclear bomb for Tehran. It bypasses American conventional superiority and forces global economic pain without triggering a direct war that could lead to regime collapse in Tehran. The world does not need an atomic device to feel the weight of Iranian pressure when they can simply turn off the tap on 1/3 of US imports daily. In this framework, we see why realpolitik analysis must focus on incentives and constraints rather than moral outrage or partisan framing. For the curious observer, understanding these dynamics explains why states do what they do regardless of whether those actions are morally justified. It reveals that in a world defined by strategic competition, the ability to inflict pain quickly often outweighs the possession of destructive weapons that take time to build and risk total retaliation. The game is not about who has the biggest bomb. It is about who can force the other side to blink first under economic pressure. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I am a one-person team working hard to make each video better than the last. Subscribe if you found value. It is the best way to show support. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. See you in the next video.